Me.
No way to tell. Everything's been stripped clean.
The killer covering his tracks. Seems to me we find out who Liddy was spying on, we find our killer.
Dexter didn't survive because he's clever. He survived because the writers ran out of backbone. There's a certain absurd poetry in watching Dexter, a show about a man who kills for order, descend into narrative chaos. The latest discussions swirling around the Resurrection and New Blood arcs seem to confirm it. Fans are still wrestling with the series' moral algebra, and the writer's occasional habit of balancing corpses on a wobbly scale of narrative convenience. Let's begin with the so-called dark passenger dispute. Dexter Morgan's outrage over another killer, Red, borrowing his inner demon's moniker, is as darkly comic as it is telling. It's the serial killer equivalent of a copyright claim. "He took my name," Dexter growls, wounded by the plagiarism of psychopathy. A rational man might laugh off the coincidence. Dexter, a man whose social calendar is filled with bloodslides and body bags, does not. That his ego flares over intellectual property theft and murder branding is almost tender, if not deranged. After all, the dark passenger is meant to be private, a metaphor Dexter invented to explain the split between his homicidal urges and his human facade. The moment someone else utters it, his delusion of uniqueness crumbles. The show's irony lies in that. Dexter's monstrous self-perception is a fragile identity, and the theft of it enrages him more than any moral accusation ever could. But Red, despite his plagiarism, is less a threat to Dexter's mythos than a reflection of it. He's an unhinged killer, yes, but his fury feels authentic, less theatrical than Al's murder show and tell routine. Red kills from rage, Al kills for art. Between them stands Dexter and the polished craftsman who disguises bloodlust as purpose, and yet it is Al, Rapunzel, as he's chillingly called, who emerges as the most terrifying of the serial club. Where Red rages and Gemini poses, Rapunzel smiles. He's a chameleon, the quiet monster who doesn't perform monstrosity. His murders lack flourish because he lacks ego. His outward demeanor, harmless, devoted, domestic, is a mask so seamless that even the other predators can't see the void behind it. Dexter may be self-aware, but Rapunzel is self-contained. He kills with no justification, no mythology, no moral scaffolding to cling to. Ask him which face is real, and he'd answer yeah. Each killer in the taxonomy of Dexter represents a pathology of control. Lowell accepts his demise as fate. Gemini drowns in insecurity disguised as grandeur. Red self-destructs through fixation. Rapunzel, however, simply endures. He survives by being unremarkable, his genius lying in his mediocrity. It's almost insulting to the show's pantheon of flamboyant murderers, a killer so efficient he becomes invisible. He is what Dexter could be without his tragic poetry. Pure, unburdened functionality. That efficiency, of course, makes him narratively inconvenient. A man who kills quietly and survives indefinitely offers little spectacle. So the show places him in proximity to discovery. Prodder finds him, perhaps too easily, and we're asked to believe that even the most cautious predator occasionally takes the bait of opportunity. His one mistake is the fatal one, letting himself be found. Thematically fitting, if logistically dubious. Speaking of dubious logistics, let us pivot to Angela Bishop's decision to let Dexter walk free after New Blood. Here, moral reasoning meets narrative panic. She knows Dexter killed her colleague Logan, a police officer no less, and yet she lets him go, apparently pacified by gratitude. After all, Dexter solved the case of her missing friend and exposed the horrors of Kurt Caldwell's trophy graveyard. "You will see truly evil things there," he tells her, a line meant to absolve him through comparative monstrosity. The problem is, the show expects us to agree. Angela's forgiveness is treated as an act of moral complexity, but it's closer to ethical surrender. The writing insists she had no real case. Too little evidence, too many technicalities, too much small-town bureaucracy. The needle marks could be coincidence. The ketamine, circumstantial. The burned cabin, ambiguous. And yes, the word of a drug dealer is not a prosecutorial slam dunk. All true, but the moral math remains grotesque. She releases a confessed serial killer because he helped close cold cases. Justice by convenience. Perhaps this was the writer's own dilemma. Having killed Dexter off once, they needed him resurrected for franchise survival. The solution? A loophole disguised as moral ambiguity. Angela, facing the impossible burden of proof, lets him slip away, because otherwise resurrection couldn't exist. The result is less an ethical gray zone than a writer's white flag. Dexter, the embodiment of self-justified murder, is vindicated not by logic, but by necessity. This isn't the first time the show has bent reason into a pretzel to keep him free. The running gag of how Dexter maintains his day job while juggling ritual homicide is an unintentional masterpiece of workplace satire. His colleagues, perpetually distracted, treat his disappearances as endearing quirks of the office oddball. Half-day Dexter, they joke, as if vanishing for murder breaks no HR policy. He's salaried after all, results-oriented. As long as the blood reports arrive on time, who cares where he actually is? The series occasionally nods to this absurdity. Masuka's endless willingness to cover for him is less friendship than blind faith. Lagerta, his nominal supervisor, barely comprehends his duties until halfway through the show's run. In any real department, a phone call could unravel Dexter's double life. But in the bureaucratic fog of Miami Metro, plausible deniability reigns supreme. It's almost poetic justice, the system so lazy and self-satisfied that it breeds its own serial killer in a cubicle. If the early seasons balance this irony with tight plotting, later arcs, particularly New Blood, lean into narrative elasticity. And nowhere is that elasticity more debated than in Season 5, the show's most polarizing chapter. It follows the emotional fallout of Rita's death, pairing Dexter with Lumen, a survivor turned Avenger. Some hail it as one of the show's most nuanced examinations of trauma and partnership, others dismiss it as a filler season, limping in the shadow of the Trinity Killer. Season 5's greatest crime, it seems, is being fine rather than transcendent. Its villains, Jordan Chase and his entourage of sleazy acolytes, lack the menace of previous antagonists, their menace diluted by motivational incoherence. But to reduce the season to its villains is to miss its quiet brilliance. Lumen. She is Dexter's mirror, his one genuine emotional connection post-Rita, and the first person to truly understand his compulsion without recoiling. Her exit, abrupt and unsatisfying as it may feel, underscores the tragedy of Dexter's life. Connection cannot coexist with compulsion. Still, the criticism stands. Her departure feels like a contractual decision, not a character one. The writers clearly painted themselves into a corner. Lumen could neither stay nor believably vanish without emotional consequence, so they opted for an unconvincing enlightenment. She is healed, she moves on, and Dexter is left once again alone with his passenger. The emotional logic phrase, but the thematic intent remains intact. No one can share the burden of Dexter's darkness for long. This inconsistency marks the broader trajectory of the series. Seasons 1 through 4 built a psychological cathedral. Seasons 5 through 8 renovated it with duct tape. By the time Resurrection arrived, the writers had stopped asking, what would Dexter do? And started asking, how can we keep him alive long enough for another season? The result is a series both brilliant and self-sabotaging. A show that simultaneously dissects moral ambiguity and indulges in it shamelessly. Yet for all its narrative contortions, Dexter remains compelling because it reflects something uncomfortable about audiences themselves. The willingness to excuse evil if it's aesthetically tidy or cathartic. Dexter kills killers, therefore he's palatable. Angela forgives him, therefore she's reasonable. Red, Al, Gemini, Rapunzel all exist to remind us that morality in Dexter's world is not about justice, but taste. We prefer our monsters articulate, introspective, and well-groomed. And perhaps that's the show's enduring genius. Beneath its procedural trappings and serial killer of the weak pacing, Dexter is a study in hypocrisy, both his and ours. It asks why we cheer for a man who dismembers people in the name of order, why we crave moral structure but not moral consequence. Every justification he makes, we accept because we want to believe that evil, properly managed, can serve the greater good. In that sense, The Dark Passenger is not merely Dexter's invention, it's the audience's too. We ride along, rationalizing the body count, soothing ourselves with the fiction that some murders are necessary. When Dexter protests that someone stole his name, perhaps it's less a cry of wounded pride and more an accusation aimed outward. He's not angry that Red used the phrase. He's angry that the world dared to imitate him, to blur the boundaries of his own delusion. Because for all his ritual precision and forensic detachment, Dexter Morgan remains the most fragile kind of monster, the one who needs to believe he's special. And for a decade and counting, the audience has obliged him.